Hello, I'm Casey Aiken, and this is 21 This Week. Coming up next, Democratic Vice Chair of Maryland House panel says new tax on businesses forcing him to move to Virginia. Wes Moore is considered a Democratic rock star, but will budget deal throw shade on his luster? And County Council divided over housing plans. Our panel of insiders will give you the story behind the story. We're joined by the Secretary of the Maryland Republican Central Committee, Mark Uncapher, and former County Council member and CEO of SkillSmart, Mike Knapp. Stay tuned for these stories and more on the next 21 This Week. This week, Maryland Governor Wes Moore appeared on the C4 and Bryan Nehman show on WBAL to tout the fiscal 2026 budget deal. If the governor thought he was in with a telegenic smile, thought he was among friends, he quickly learned that he was not, as the two hosts demonstrated their skepticism over the proposed budget deal and questioned how the governor could call a new tax on IT businesses, new taxes on estates, and an increased tax on the wealthy, how this will grow the state economy and incentivize new businesses. Mike, aren't you the lucky one? You get this question.
Thanks.
Here's the jarring headline from the Baltimore Sun. I mean, this WBAL radio host to Moore. How can you say the budget is pro-growth?
I don't know. How can you? I think that it calls it what it is. I think that's a really challenging year. And we're going to raise a bunch of taxes. It's hard to call that pro-growth. Unfortunately, this has been a problem that's been a long time in the making, and it's a Maryland problem, but we haven't fixed it. We're seeing other states like our neighbors to the south in Virginia that actually have a budget surplus, and we're looking at a deficit. And the reality is that we've got to figure out how to trim what's there and figure out how to incentivize folks to do things differently.
Well, you're absolutely right. This is a self-imposed problem that the state has. Mark, an equally damaging headline followed when Bryan Crosby, a Democratic House delegate member from St. Mary's County, and more importantly, the vice chairman of the Economic Matters Committee, said that the new 3% tech tax drove his decision to move his business to Virginia. What do you make of that?
Well, yes, he's moving a business that was in one of those industries that the governor had highlighted as being part of the future for the state of Maryland. Most of their operations are going to go down to Virginia Beach. There'll be a small presence remaining in Maryland. The fact that they're expecting to raise some $500 million on a 3% tax on these IT services demonstrates how big this is as a component of the industry. It really is much larger in Maryland than it is sort of proportionally in other states. The problem is, of course, those services can easily be moved to other states like Virginia. And in a competitive marketplace, particularly feeding into the federal government where you can bid across state lines, there's a real risk that business will move to the state, and we won't realize $500 million. We will manage to kill the goose that's laying the proverbial golden egg for the state.
Well, I testified on behalf of my industry's trade association, the Maryland Land Title Association, in the House version of the bill, and hearings were 6 hours long, and there were hundreds of small businesses. Just like the IT industry, the hotel industry. I mean, all of us were there in opposition to the business-to-business tax. And we repeatedly pointed out, this tax is easy to evade. I mean, my industry has gone mostly all online. You can, with remote notarization, you don't have to be in Maryland to notarize a deed or a deed of trust. You could be somewhere else. In fact, I've had notaries sign off on deeds that were being signed in Cameroon. I mean, this is, there is a way to get around some of these things. And, Yeah, IT, I think, was low-hanging fruit because so many other states have picked up on an IT tax because it's a growing business. But this is this is going to be a real problem. I don't think they're going to get the 500 million that they're projecting. And Mike, here's a sample of other new taxes and fees. Two new tax brackets targeting the middle class and the wealthy, a limitation of allowing people earning over $200,000 from using itemized deductions. This is going to be a tax directly on the middle class, by the way. Creating a new 2% capital gains surcharge for people earning over $350,000. And here's one that most people haven't heard about: the decoupling of the Maryland estate tax exemption from the federal exemption, which means that small Maryland estates will now be subject to the estate tax, and then on and on. So where does it end, Mike?
It's a really good question. I think one of the real challenges that we continue to have is that, one, this is not a new issue, right? We have seen our adjusted gross income earners leaving the state of Maryland for the last 15 years. As you pointed out in some of the materials you provided us, Adam Pagnuccio does a great analysis of this. And this is not something that we woke up to 2 years ago. This is something that's been happening since 2010 in the state of Maryland. We also know that we have an over-reliance on the federal government, which is becoming crystal clear to everyone if they weren't aware before over the last month, with the federal government cutting the positions that they are, having a direct effect on the state of Maryland, and disproportionate to the number of people that we have here. And we've got to have a legislature that starts to understand what role that businesses play and the people play in the state, and we just don't have an understanding for that. We have an idea that we have the education blueprint, which is a laudable goal, but it's costly. We didn't identify a way to pay for it. Now we don't have the resources to pay for the basic elements of our budget, and we're still trying to figure out how to maintain that, and we're going to have to figure out how to reduce what we have, but also at the same time grow our economic base. And I'm not seeing any discussion or proposals around that. We're trying to kind of double down on the tax increases.
Well, what's shocking, I think, and I hear this from ordinary folks, is that the House of Delegates still continue to expand their programs. For example, they threw about $500 billion at abortion services. There's just no recognition that they can't keep spending. That's kind of shocking. Mark, I'm going to turn to you. You're going to have the last. Virginia, as Mike was talking about, Virginia's top end tax rate is 5.75%. And when the governor's tax proposal is approved, that will increase to 9.8%. And Adam Pagnuccio, who has analyzed the Maryland wealth drain since 2013 in a remarkable series of articles, pointed out that Montgomery County is the runaway leader in lost income in the state, followed by Baltimore City and Prince George's County. So at what point will people stop wanting to move to Maryland?
Well, you put your finger on one of the challenges, which of course is the competition with Virginia, but actually the competition is worse than that, which is that a number of states have dropped their top income tax rate. For example, West Virginia used to have a 6.5% top cap. In just the last 2 or 3 years, it's now under 5%. North Carolina used to be closer to where Maryland is, I think with 7.75% like 10 years ago. They're now down at 4.25%. So the competition among the states to attract people is not just, Florida and Texas with no income tax, but also adjacent states or relatively adjacent states that have become much more competitive. They've had the budget surpluses. Might mention the fact that Virginia has had a budget surplus, and they've been able to apply those surpluses to reducing their income tax rate, making them much more competitive with states like Maryland.
Mike, any final thoughts?
Well, I think what I would just say is one of the challenges I think we have in Maryland is people tend to isolate the policies that we're trying to address. So we say, we want to be pro-education. And I think that's fine, and we need to be. But you can't be pro-education and provide those resources to ensure that you're doing that well, and then not be able to make sure you're keeping those people you've just educated in the state that we reside, because that's the intent, right? To really grow your economic base, to make your people stronger, and to give everyone opportunity. And we're missing that piece. We do one at the expense of the other, and we haven't figured out how to take a holistic approach.
Well, Mike, and this is the argument that I continually make. If we want to improve our education, we should go to a voucher program and introduce competition into the public square for public education. But we got to go on to our next topic. We'll chew up that old chestnut later. According to the Hill newspaper, the National Democratic Party is looking to Maryland Governor Wes Moore as one of its rising stars in the party. And Wes Moore, the man with the telegenic smile, is described by some as Captain America of the Democratic politics. He's a veteran, he's an athlete, and a Rhodes Scholar. He's got every item on his ticket punched to be president, or so they think. Mark, and I'm going to get in trouble for saying this. I've had little nicknames for all of the Democratic governors throughout the years. Governor Glenn Do Nothing, Governor Martin O'Malley. I'm going to call him Governor Smiley from now on. He's had an easy run of it until this year. How damaging will the tax and spend budget affect his political future?
Well, it remains to be seen. I'm the last person to handicap the 2026 Democratic presidential. I have enough trouble trying to handicap the Republicans, so I'll defer to Mike on that. I think it's going to be a challenge. I think that he certainly becomes the poster child, if you will, for the blue state model. We've already talked. I won't belabor the point, but it does then set up a whole conversation about the competition between the states that Maryland is on the losing side of.
Well, we got plenty of examples of governors in blue states that want to run. Right. So, Mike, a little controversy developed this past week with, according to Maryland law, lawmakers are prohibited from accepting campaign contributions or making campaign appearances during the session of the General Assembly. And now it's been widely reported that Governor Moore is the featured guest for a political action committee fundraiser on April 2nd, 5 days before Sine Die. Is this going to diminish his allure, or is just going to be treated as a nothing burger?
I don't know. We live in a world right now where diminishing allure and tarnishing images doesn't seem to be quite what it once was when we're selling Teslas on the front lawn of the White House. Clearly, clearly, conflicts of interest aren't that big a deal anymore. So I don't think he should do it. I think given the way that the state has operated and given the rules that we have in place, how will people perceive it? Again, if I look at the things that are happening right now at the federal and national level and things that are happening at our federal institutions, the president's selling cryptocurrency, we're selling merchandise out of the White House, near as I can tell. I don't know. It doesn't seem that people care about these things anymore.
Well, it's interesting. I think as things get more local as opposed to national, people do pick up and pick up on these things. And Governor Moore's got 2 more years in office before he has to run for re-election, and so maybe it will be just a nothing burger in the future. But I do think that the inability to be more fiscally responsible is going to hurt him if he decides to run for president in 2028. I think people are going to look for obviously a change from what the current administration is, but they're not going to want to have someone who's just willing to open up the purse strings right away. Any final thoughts from either one of you?
No, I guess I would just say that I agree. I think it'd be a good thing for him not to do. That being said, I think the fiscal challenges that we're facing at the state have been a long time coming, and I think this was his first challenge to try and figure out how to address this. I don't necessarily think that the approach is going to be seen as the most successful, but it's not going anywhere. He's got a couple of years to figure out how to come up with some better solutions, because clearly the economic challenges that we're going to face, given what's happening at the federal level, are going to be significant and ongoing. So we're going to have an opportunity to see his leadership over this come to fruition right in front of us.
Okay. I think Adrian Jones is going to be more important to this than the governor, but that's just a personal opinion. When we come back from this short break, Why is the Montgomery County Council divided over housing policies? Stay tuned. I thought we needed housing.
Hey world, I have a quick message. It's about safe driving. All right, let's go. Anytime you're driving, have the seatbelt buckled tight. Both hands on the wheel and your phone out of sight. When not in your hand trying to text somebody back. Because if you do, your car might get smacked. The moral of the story, just put your phone down. The people on the road will stay safe and sound. Put your phone down, put your phone down. People on the road will stay safe and sound. Yeah.
Jordan knows he shouldn't eat this entire bowl of nachos, but tonight he's earned that right because a few hours ago in the middle of happy hour, he recognized a sign. Not from the gods or a bolt of lightning, but from a double heart, a kissy face, and a fourth ha in ha ha ha. That's when Jordan knew he was buzzed. So when it was time to go, he got a ride home instead of driving. Be a legend like Jordan. Recognize your buzzed warning signs and get a ride home. Buzz driving is drunk driving.
Welcome back. Now, it's always perplexed me why in our complex society that provides a standard of living unfathomable to much of the world, that the path to power in Montgomery County since the days of Neil Potter in the 1980s, he came to power in 1990, is to invoke the D word. You know the D word. It says developers. It's giveaway to developers. Well, forget that developers actually build useful and necessary things like housing, roads, schools, offices, and the like. The quickest way to political success in our county is to denounce the developers. And the More Housing Now legislative package, which would allow more residential building types, including duplexes, triplexes, and townhomes in an attempt to expand the workforce housing stock in Montgomery County, is being opposed by several council members, not to mention the county executive, but also most notably by Will Jawando. Mark, there are a lot of reasons to question whether the wisdom of the Now housing plan is viable, but giving away to developers, is that one of them?
Well, of course, the Jawando assumption is that the money, the incentives that are provided go straight into the pocket of the developers. When we know one of the problems in the county is that housing is extremely expensive to build, is unaffordable. And part of what these incentives do is make projects that might otherwise not be economically viable attractive. So moving, for example, office space into housing, vacant office space into housing would make a lot of sense, but the numbers may not work out unless you provide the incentive. I think Councilman Jawando has it all wrong in assuming that it's just something that enhances the profitability of projects. Since there are not a lot of projects going on, so it suggests that there's not a lot of profitability in the current marketplace.
Well, it amazes me. I mean, a good example is what's going on in California. In the aftermath of the fires, there was a lot of talk about how they were going to relax their permitting rules and their environmental rules in order to rebuild. And as of this week, I understand only 2 building permits have been renewed to build because they have not relaxed the rules. So it seems this is a problem that Montgomery County has created for itself, not just for this particular legislative piece, but for the housing in general. And now, Mike, the county executive is vocal in his opposition to this plan. Where are we going to get new housing from? I mean, that's affordable for people if we keep opposing all of the. This is a kind of a trying to put a thread through the eye of a needle kind of solution.
No, I mean, it is. So housing is a huge issue. If you look at the entire region, we need at least 320,000 new housing units in the region over the next 5 years, between 2030. About 50,000 of those should be coming from Montgomery County. We've averaged about 2,200 new housing units a year so over the last 20 years. And so if you go back and look at that, clearly we're not, and nowhere near close to where we need to be, which continues just to drive the price of the existing housing up. Everyone likes to talk about it, but no one actually wants to do anything. And we want to put controls on rent, which then limits the supply there. We've already seen that most developers of multi-dwelling housing are not building anything in Montgomery County. So that's taking housing out of stock, making that unavailable. And now we're going tit for tat over things that'll create a couple hundred more units maybe, just because it's an election year. And it's not a surprise that the county executive is opposed, because those are the folks who are base who voted for him for the last 25 years too, are the folks who generally don't want to see any additional growth. To your point, he picks up very much on kind of the Neil Potter team. And so, we continue to say housing is really important, but nobody actually really wants to have a conversation, because at the end of the day, I still have to run for office, and I want to make sure that I have a platitude that someone can say, see, I was against this, vote for me. And we still haven't solved the problem.
Yeah. Mark, any thoughts?
Well, I think this is another one of the divides, red state, blue state model. And one of the challenge blue states like Maryland and Montgomery County have is that housing is unaffordable. And as much as tax policy makes a difference to where businesses locate, Texas and Florida, North Carolina, I could go down the list of red states, tend to have lower housing prices and tend to have that much more attractive to people to move to.
Yeah, well, it's not just tax policy. I mean, we've got regulations. I mean, we're
Right.
trying to regulate, and stop the use of natural gas in new housing. I mean, we're regulating ourselves into a box that we can't find an exit for. It's we're creating a maze of restrictions that just keep us from solving the problem, and we keep going in a circular fashion.
No, we do. I mean, there were 465,000 new jobs in Dallas over the last 5 years. Net new job growth in Montgomery County was 0. And rather than sit and go, okay, what are things that we can learn from there and be able to take those learnings? And again, there are certain policies in Dallas that we don't want to necessarily engage, but they still added 500,000 new jobs. So let's take a look at what people are doing there to be successful and see what we can learn from that and try to adapt it to our community and our culture.
Great way to wrap up the segment, Mike. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mark. Now stay tuned for parting shots.
When I first saw a turtle, my heart was full. Now I'm anything but lonely.
We had this deep connection, this heart connection.
He just wants to be close to you and part of your life.
Every day with turtle is a perfect day.
When I'm holding her, it makes me feel calmer.
I think everything he does shows how much he loves us.
When we adopt a shelter pet,
We discover
they're a little bit of a lot of things.
But they're all pure love.
Jordan knows he shouldn't eat this entire bowl of nachos, but tonight he's earned that right, because a few hours ago in the middle of happy hour, he recognized a sign. Not from the gods or a bolt of lightning, but from a double heart, a kissy face, and a fourth ha in ha ha ha. That's when Jordan knew he was buzzed. So when it was time to go, he got a ride home instead of driving. Be a legend like Jordan. Recognize your buzzed warning signs and get a ride home. Buzz driving is drunk driving.
If I could go back and change it all, I would. I think I'm gonna miss you the most. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Or maybe it's just the little moments. If I could go back and change it all, if I could go back, I would. But I can't.
Now with parting shots, Mike Knapp.
Thanks, Casey. First, I just want to commend our folks at the University of Maryland College Park. The basketball teams, both men and women, have advanced to the Sweet 16, and I think that is commendable and nice that they've both managed to pull that off at the same time. On a more dour note, though, I also want to applaud the efforts of our nonprofit and education leaders who are scrambling to try and figure out how to manage and address the issues that are being confronted as a result of reduced federal spending and cuts to federal aid for education and nonprofits. It's a challenging issue, and I know they're all working hard to try and figure out how to do that and meet the needs of our community.
Thank you, Mike. Mark Uncapher, your parting shot.
Well, I wanted to follow up on housing, and I wanted to focus particularly on Tacoma Park. So the Tacoma Park Metro Station went in almost 50 years ago in 78. Rent control went into effect in 1981. So on one hand, this is an area that ought to have more housing because of transit accessibility. On the other hand, it also has the marketplace considerations. It turns out housing has not expanded in Tacoma Park. Surprise, surprise. There's no new construction that took place. In fact, they lost units between 2000 and 2020. Not by a lot, by enough that was somewhat significant. This is why housing becomes so unaffordable, is the lack of increase in supply.
Thank you, Mark. I want to thank you both for appearing today. I want to thank the audience for tuning in each and every week to Montgomery County's hardest-hitting political talk show. For 21 this week, I'm Casey Aiken.